And we are live. Thank you guys for coming. So, it's talking to a friend of mine. It's actually the guy who I put in charge of the Discord when I take vacations. I gave him the Discord. And he's been running it this whole time for me. So, I appreciate that, Swifty. I'm talking to him the other night, and he's telling me about this new Pokemon game. I don't know how I missed this new Pokemon game. It's been out for like 2 weeks. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Pokemon generally anymore. I used to be a really big fan. But this one is a remake of a classic game that I played when I was younger, of Pokemon Yellow. So I had to get it. So I imagine a lot of you guys are wondering, how was it that I got to play Pokemon when I was younger? Because it was demonized by a lot of churches, not just the extreme of the extreme. There were some reasonably moderate churches that demonized Pokemon. So how is it that I got away with playing it as a Jehovah's Witness growing up? Because I did play it an awful lot. And the answer to that is there are a few Kingdom Halls that vary on very small things. So a few issues that change from Kingdom Hall to Kingdom Hall. Pokemon just happened to be one of those issues. So generally, I think that it was kind of frowned upon heavily by a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, but basically every kid in my Kingdom Hall played Pokemon. And, their parents let them. And as a result, my parents let me. I remember getting Pokemon Blue. I had Blue, which was weird because everybody had Red. But eventually, I ended up, a lot of the kids in my hall played Pokemon too, and we traded and all kinds of stuff. It was a really awesome game, really big part of my life. I had like guidebooks and all kinds of stuff. Generation 2 comes along, Silver, Gold, and Crystal. And I got a Game Boy Kiwi, like the bright green one that came with Pokemon Crystal. And I played through most of it. I never did end up beating it before one of the kids in the hall stole it from me. Jerk. So I didn't end up getting to finish that game. I have it now. I own the game now. I own all the Pokemon games now, but it's one of those things that you just have to appreciate when you're younger to appreciate now. Those generations, because they're really, really dated now. Like, those games are genuinely hard to get into now if you didn't play them then. But anyways, yeah, so I'm not a big fan of the second generation. Not a big fan of Silver, Gold, and Crystal. But I did love Generation 1. I loved those games. I still own Red, Blue, and Yellow. And I have Fire Red and Leaf Green for the Game Boy Advance. And I'm actually really happy to see that they created this basically remake of Pokemon Yellow. So I went to the store, like literally within 5 minutes of hearing that it existed. I got in my car and drove to the store to buy it. I don't know. I have a thing about owning physical copies. I just prefer to own physical copies, So I ended up, I could have downloaded the thing right then and there, but I'd rather just own the physical copy. So I went to Walmart, bought it, and I've been playing it over the past couple of days. And it's pretty good, but I do have some complaints about it. One thing that I'm not really fond of is the fact that they've basically completely removed the random battles element. There are no random battles anymore. It's random Pokemon encounters that you try to catch. And they give you experience when you do catch them, and you can give them to Professor Oak for candies and things. So it's, the goal is to catch as many as you can. But honestly, I don't know. I really like the battle element to it. The random battle element. I feel like I feel like I'm going through leveling up my Pokemon here and not getting used to them, not getting used to their techniques or their abilities or their stats or any of that, because I'm not grinding through with them. I'm just grinding through catching other Pokemon. I don't know. That kind of bothers me, but it's actually really amazing to see this old game that I played back in like the 90s, like 1990, I don't know, 98 or something like that, 99. It's amazing to see this old game completely remade from the ground up. It's genuinely amazing to see it. It's really, really good artwork. It's stylized art. So they didn't try to make it look realistic. They tried to give it this cartoony kind of feel to it. And anybody that's ever been in game development or game design knows that if you want a game to last, that's how you do it. You don't make the game look realistic. You're not going for a realistic feel. You're going for a stylized feel, a cartoony kind of thing. That's why Breath of the Wild, the game Breath of the Wild, that's why it worked on the Wii U and on the Switch, at least in part, because they weren't going for realistic, best graphics out there. They weren't trying to compete with the Xbox and the PlayStation. Nintendo wasn't. They wanted to compete in quality, in game quality. You know, they've been riding the waves of these franchises for years and years. Zelda, Metroid, Mario, you know, all of this stuff. And it's worked for them because these games are really fun. They're really fun games. Now, you get the occasional game that, you know, they try to make it look realistic. Like with the PlayStation or the Xbox, you've got Skyrim. They're trying to make that game look as realistic as possible, for example. In 10 years, that realistic feel that those games have is going to look really bad. Just the graphics are going to look really bad. But at the same time, Breath of the Wild will have stood the test of time. So I really think Nintendo knows what they're doing. I think they've known what they were doing since day one. They have always gone for absolute top-notch quality in games. They have invested tons of time and money and work into creating franchises that would last. They did a really fantastic job at it. So, yeah, I just thought that was interesting. I think the new Pokemon game is really good generally, but there are some things that kind of get on my nerves about it. It holds your hand, for one thing. It holds your hand like the old game did not. And it's like, did it really have to hold your hand like that? I mean, back in the 90s when I was playing it, we didn't have the internet. We couldn't, I mean, not like it is today. We couldn't look things up like we can today. If we walk off of the SSN and we have no idea what to do next, we can just look that up on the internet. Simple as that. But back in the 90s, you had to ask kids on the bus how they did it. You had to ask kids at school for these little tricks. And there was always misinformation spreading around the school about it too. Like, oh yeah, if you hold down and B when you throw a Pokeball, then it'll raise the catch rate. Or they'd say, if you fight the Elite Four 10 times in a row and then go talk to your mom in the, what's the opening village? Pallet Town. If you talk to your mom in Pallet Town after that, then she'll give you a Togepi or something like that. And I don't know. It's just total BS. But, or that truck, that Mew was under the truck in Pokemon. Like everybody who was alive in the 90s knew that story. Everybody, you know, tried all of the ridiculous rumors. And you know, the people who made Pokemon, they were aware of those rumors. So every iteration of Pokemon where they remade blue, red, or yellow from that moment on had that truck in that spot so that people could go there and check it out. I don't know. Younger people probably have no idea what I'm talking about. I just think it's so funny. As a lot of you guys know, I did an interview with the John Cedars channel recently. Lloyd Evans is his name. And I've actually been doing some interviews with a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses lately. I think since Leah Remini's show came out, if you guys don't know about that, by the way, you should check it out. It's this show on A&E called Scientology and the Aftermath. Yeah, that's the name of it. Leah Remini, Scientology and the Aftermath. Okay, so Leah Remini, she's a Scientologist for like a really long time. And she came to realize that it was complete BS and created this show on A&E as an expose of Scientology. Well, recently she decided to not just talk about Scientology, but talk about cults. And she covered Jehovah's Witnesses in this latest season. So you should check that out if you haven't already. But as a result of that show, there have been a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses flooding to YouTube and the media generally to, talk about their story, to hear other people's stories. There have been just dozens of ex-Jehovah's Witness stories on YouTube. And they're getting so much support. 16, 20,000 views, 100,000 views, some of them. Just an insane amount of support. So I've been interviewing some of these people for the podcast. These are going to be coming out soon on the podcast channel if you guys want to watch them. Probably this Tuesday I'll have one. It's an interesting phenomena, to say the least, to see all of these Jehovah's Witnesses or ex-Jehovah's Witnesses coming out of the woodwork like this. And I'm honestly glad to see this. I'm glad to see the swell of support, because a lot of these people who didn't really know about YouTube before, didn't realize that there were ex-Jehovah's Witnesses talking about this stuff on YouTube. They're just sitting at home dealing with these issues on their own, not realizing that there is legitimately a community out there of people who can help them, like me and like all of you guys. Like everybody who listens to my channel is part of the community of people who have most likely been hurt by a cult in some way. And if you haven't, then you're here for people who have. So I'm glad to see that kind of support. I'm glad to see that people are coming to realize that it exists, that we're here, and all that stuff. But yeah, it's interesting interviewing people. Like I was not a social person when I was growing up at all. I was isolated for a good portion of my childhood, completely isolated from people for a long, long time, and just completely socially crippled. Just completely crippled. And talking to people now is something that I have to get used to. I have to learn how to do. I have to learn how to interact with people. Because a lot of the time when I did interact with people, for a really long time, I would say really strange things. It didn't really make any sense to anybody but me. And I don't know. It was just completely impossible to make friends with anybody as a result of that. So it's odd now. It's a change to want. It's a change for people to want to talk to me, at least in the form of an interview. It's a change for people to be asking me questions about my story, or for me to be asking them about their story. It doesn't really fit my personality type, and it's a role that I'm trying to adapt to become better at, because I feel like it's necessary to talk to people about their stories. And it's interesting. I like doing it. It's just hard for me to get used to it is all. There were a couple of questions that I wanted to address one of which was from a patron of mine, Legalize. He was talking about the Pope and his statements on homosexuality. So I pulled this up, this article. Pope Francis says he's worried about homosexuality in the priesthood. Okay. The thing about this is, let me just read a little bit of this article and we'll get a feel for what he said. Men with deep-rooted homosexual tendencies should not be admitted to the Catholic clergy, and priests who are gay should be celibate or leave, rather than lead a double life, Pope Francis said in a new book. Francis made the comments in a book-length interview with Spanish priest Fernando Prado called The Strength of Vocation, in which he discusses the challenges of being a priest or nun today. As far as I know, to be a priest, you have to be celibate, right? That means you can't sleep with anybody. That was my understanding of it. Now, if that's the case, fine. That's okay. You can tell gay guys not to sleep with anybody as long as you're telling straight guys not to sleep with anybody either. If that's the rule for everybody, period, no sleeping with anyone, fine. I think that's a stupid rule. I think it's damaging, and I think it makes people's minds go absolutely crazy. And I think that it's at least part of your problem here is sexual repression and the brain just disintegrating in this huge mess because it has no idea how to handle these sexual feelings or any sexual feelings at all. So anyways, I think it's wrong to deprive people of sex in general. I think that celibacy in the priesthood is a bad idea. I think they should be allowed to get married and have kids and all that. But whatever. If that's the rule for everybody, then that's the rule for everybody. If we're not singling out gay people here, fine. But I think that one of the issues one of the issues with what he's saying here is he is conflating homosexuality with pedophilia. Other people may say it's not an offense necessarily, but it's a sexual state. You're in a state of sexuality, a certain type of sexuality. And pedophilia is, to some extent, a sexual state also. And they're conflating them. They're saying that being gay is leading to pedophilia, or it is the cause of it, or it's linked in some way, when it's not. It is not linked. Those two things are separate completely. I mean, let me put it this way. Being gay does not turn you into a molester. So it's like looking at too much porn does not inevitably lead to you becoming a prostitute or some ridiculous thing. It does not lead to those things. It's a non sequitur. You start with a premise and you're coming up with this ridiculous conclusion that isn't linked to the premises at all. So anyway, I don't know. That's what I'm drawing from this. But let me just read this again. Men with deep-rooted homosexual tendencies should not be admitted to the Catholic clergy, and priests who are gay should be celibate or leave rather than lead a double life. If the rule, like I said, if the rule is for everybody celibacy, fine. I agree. They should leave or be celibate. I mean, you don't have to be part of this organization if you don't want. I mean, leaving is an option. That's okay. You can leave. So I agree with the second half, but men with deep-rooted homosexual tendencies should not be admitted to the Catholic clergy. I'm not sure what he's getting at with that. Deep-rooted homosexual tendencies, is he saying that people who talk in a flamboyant way shouldn't be admitted to the church? Or people who are attracted to attracted to people of the same sex as them? Is that the issue? Like, they shouldn't be admitted to the church? How would anybody ever know if they didn't say? Aren't they supposed to be celibate? That means they can't sleep with anybody else their entire lives, ever. As far as I know, that's what it means. You can't be a priest and ever sleep with anybody else. So I don't know. It's kind of a complicated issue, but one thing that I do want to point out I feel is extremely important is homosexuality and pedophilia are two different things and should not be conflated. We have to understand that they're separate issues. And I know that the person who brought this up to me has some things to say on it, so I will talk to him about it in more detail at length after the podcast and see if we can figure out, what our feelings are on all of it. But I feel like if we stopped conflating homosexuality and pedophilia, that things would be a lot more clear. So anyway, there was another question I had here. What do I think of ignorance of the difference of abiogenesis and the Big Bang Theory? Interesting question. I've noticed that there's a conflation of abiogenesis, the Big Bang Theory, and of evolution. So people say, you believe in evolution. Well, how did we get here? Those are two separate questions. Those are two separate issues completely. Evolution addresses how one life form turns to another life form, not how life came to exist in the first place. And I feel like a lot of the time, now bear in mind, this is no offense to Christians or anything. I intend no offense toward Christians. But I've noticed that a lot of the time Christians are a little bit underinformed on the issues. That's the problem. I think they're underinformed on what evolution is and how it operates. For example, you've got people saying, if we came from monkeys, then why are there still monkeys? First of all, we did not come from monkeys. And second, we share common ancestors. We share a common ancestor with apes. That's the claim. That's what we're saying. That's what evolution says. And it's a pretty solidified scientific theory at this point. It isn't like, it's not like a hypothesis. We just throw it out there like, we think this happened. We think this is how it works. That isn't the case. That isn't, we've gone way beyond that point by now. We've been working on this scientific theory for centuries. And we understand how it works, and we've proven it in labs. It isn't a question anymore. It's not up for debate anymore. Evolution is a fact. Now, there are parts of this theory of evolution that can be modified or changed or updated based on new information. But there is the fact of evolution in addition to that, which is just the fact that things change over time. Biological systems change over time. So anyway, the answer to that, what do I think of the ignorance of the difference of abiogenesis and the Big Bang Theory? That does drive me crazy a little bit when people conflate the two things. The Big Bang Theory, evolution, and abiogenesis. And for reference, abiogenesis is how life began in the first place, where it came from. And the Big Bang is the inception of the universe, the birth of the universe for all intents and purposes. And evolution is how organisms change over time. So there was another question from somebody. Wasp says, today I was talking with my cousin, who is an elder, and confronted him with the fact that the Noah legend exists, but the Bible version is true, and there are real evidences of a great flood. Can you say anything about that? There is no real evidence of a great flood, is the issue. So let me just present this scenario. Now I'm not saying that this is a fact or anything. This is just kind of out there. Just take it as a hypothetical situation. Say there was a person who lived 4,000 years ago, and we have impeccable records that this person lived. Flawless records. We're 100% sure that they were a real person. We know all about their lives. It was very well detailed by multiple historians from that area around that time. Okay. Now let's say that person, according to these historians, well substantiated, was born of a virgin. And let's say he performed these miracles like turning water into wine and any number of other things. Now let's say we have records of a different person from 2,000 years after that, not well substantiated, that lists this guy, this new guy, as doing the same things, performing the same miracles, doing the same things in his life as the old person. You have to assume that at the very least, the writers who talked about this new guy derived some of their ideas and writings from the old guy. I mean, that's just plausible. But just the fact that this story of Gilgamesh mirrors Noah's flood so well. I mean, not flawlessly. There are differences. But the fact that it exists should be enough to give you some doubt, to give you some skepticism, to make you question these stories about whether or not they're actually true. I'm not saying by any stretch that it's enough to convince you that Noah's flood is fabricated. I'm not saying it's enough to say that the Epic of Gilgamesh is fabricated. We can't say that with any certainty based solely off of how closely the two stories are linked. We can say with certainty that Noah's flood story is fabricated based off the fact that there's zero evidence for it. But the point behind this is that the two stories being so similar to each other should cause some doubt. If it turns out there was absolutely no way the writers of the Noah story knew about the Epic of Gilgamesh, then fine, I'll accept that. It's still fake. It was still made up. That doesn't change that. We don't need that as evidence against the Noah story to completely dismantle it. It's just another piece of evidence that points to the Noah story being made up. That's all. I know I'm upsetting some of my Christian viewers, but you're going to have to deal with it, guys. I'm sorry. This is insane to think that a guy could have fit 15,000, 30,000 animals onto a boat before nails existed. Before we had nails, before we had hammers. This was pre-Iron Age, okay? They purportedly had to use wooden pegs instead of nails. How did he carve wooden pegs? He didn't have knives. I mean, it's complete, and this boat is supposed to be huge. The biggest wooden boat ever constructed to this day. I think that somebody in the UK built a boat that was supposed to be as big as Noah's boat was supposed to be. I don't know that for sure. But it's unreasonable to think that this boat existed or that the guy could have fit, however many thousands of animals onto it for a year, for one full year. What did he do with their waste? How did he store all of the food for them? Did he put the carnivores with the herbivores? Did he put penguins in with polar bears? How did he have a cold environment? They needed a cold environment if they were going to be on this boat for a year, or they would die. How did he create a cold environment? We didn't have refrigerators. We didn't have freezers. For a year, seriously. Didn't have electricity. Couldn't plug the thing in. It just doesn't make any sense. It's completely nonsensical. Yet magic is the answer to the Noah's flood situation, obviously. I don't know why I didn't think of that. If God wanted people to... if he was just trying to kill everybody, if he just wanted everybody to die, but he wanted to save the animals, he could have just given them a heart attack. Why is that so hard? Dude just made it rain for 40 days and 40 nights. Are you telling me the guy can't give everybody a heart attack instead? Come on. Or a meteor. Yeah, a meteor would have done the trick just fine. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Next person is Medic.
Hey, mic check 1 2.
Yeah, I've got you. So we haven't talked on here before, have we?
No, I've been listening for a while now, a couple months. Been trying to get on, but then you restructured the
Oh
whole
yeah.
podcast schedule. But that's okay. I understand.
Good. Well, I'm
Try
glad
to
I got
stream
you on
myself.
here. Yeah, that's good. It was a complete mess for a minute there. We changed the way we accept names and things, but I'm glad I got you on here. That's pretty good. So tell
Yeah,
me,
appreciate having me on.
no problem. So tell me, what religion were you originally? Are you still religious or?
I was born and raised as a Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, interesting. Really?
Yeah.
So tell me about it. Like, what happened?
Well, I've been over the last little while. I saw my name moving up the list, so I've been trying to compile things into a jot note format. So let me go over quickly. So I know I didn't have as bad of a childhood as some other witnesses have had, but I did not have the nicest childhood either. So my parents split up when I was 4. My mom got married to my father at 17, so she wasn't even out of high school, and they had kids to try and fix their relationship, which is me and my sister. And my mother ended up getting disfellowship because she started smoking when she was in her late 20s. And my grandmother, funny enough, her mother and my father both told the elders, who, after 2 witnesses, told her that she was no longer welcome. So she left and she walked out on my father, leaving my father with me and my sister to raise. And after that, my grandparents moved in with my father to help raise us. And my grandfather was an elder. And my aunt and uncles on my dad's side, one went to Gilead and served in Zimbabwe, and another one became a circuit overseer as well. So very spiritually strong on that side of the family.
And how old were you roughly when your mom left?
I would say 4 or 5.
Okay, pretty young. Right.
So I don't have a good recollection of that. My sister says she remembers like them arguing and stuff like that. I don't really have any recollection of that. My mom did try to stay in our life. We'd see her every other weekend or something like that. But never really moved in with her. Until much later, at which point my sister moved out to live with my mother because she no longer wanted. My dad gave her an ultimatum, basically either if you're living with the father, then you have to follow the rules and you have to go to the meetings, and she didn't want to, so she moved out. And I didn't really understand everything at the time. I was still young. Maybe at that time I was 8 or 9 years old.
And you said this is your sister, right?
Yeah, my older sister. She moved out when she was about 14 or 15.
Oh, wow.
So that kind of almost had another traumatic thing because my father was breaking down, like you kind of hear experiences of people who said they lose their child almost like they died.
Yeah.
But she was never baptized, so she wasn't fellowshipped or anything.
Did he shun her then? He did, I assume, right?
You know what? This is the weird thing. So, we were just talking about video games.
Yeah.
And my father has always been very lenient when it came to that sort of stuff. Like, he had Serious Sam on his computer. I don't know if you know Serious Sam, but it's a very gory shooting game. And then Halo. We had Halo Combat Evolved on PC,
right.
And we were both playing it. And then you have weird experiences like we were playing Halo 2 and my dad would just walk in and be like, you shouldn't be playing this game, and then just take the Xbox away.
Weird.
And then my friend and I would go back later, he'd give it back to us, and then we find out like he beat one of the levels that we were
on. My God, really?
So it's like really weird things. Like it was almost like two-faced. Like that's how I saw things.
Right.
And that was I kind of saw sort of this happenings of the religion in that way, and saw things like, okay, my grandparents really believe this, and my dad believes it, but he's not as spiritually strong, let's say.
Right.
And he's not an elder or anything like that. And yeah, it was just kind of weird how seeing that way. And then of course my mom, as I got older, she tried to reach out to me more and more, and to the point where I was eventually started building a relationship with her, which I felt I didn't really have. But my father and others kept telling me, well, you can't talk to your mom. She's disfellowship. And they would say the same thing to my grandparents on my mom's side because they weren't supposed to talk to their daughter anymore.
Right.
But I have 2 uncles on my mom's side, one which was disfellowshipped and one that was never baptized but left the religion. And they still talk to both of those children. And so it wasn't really a big deal for them to still talk to my mother. And seeing my grandparents as an example, I would tell people like, well, my grandparents are talking to them, so I'm gonna talk to them. Like, I'm not even
Right.
baptized yet.
Sure.
You can't tell me what to do. She's my mom. And so that was kind of one of the things is like, why are you gonna tell me not to speak to my mom? Like, I don't accept that.
Right. So how old were you at this point when you were kind of talking to your mom and things?
I would say high school, so between 14 to 18 is when I started to build a relationship with her.
14 to 18. Okay. So they were kind of throwing a fit about it a little bit, telling you not to get into it, not to talk to her. And did you say anything to them about it? Did you tell them to stick it, or did you kind of follow their instructions? What happened?
I just would say to them, like, oh, I'm not talking to her about spiritual matters. And then they would just
Okay.
drop the subject.
Okay.
They didn't really pursue it. But what I was going to say is that when I'd ask people, like, oh, what's going to happen to my mother? Like, will she be in the new system? Like,
Yeah.
okay, she was disfellowship, but she's like not a bad person. She was just got addicted to cigarettes, which is something that's very difficult to break away from.
Right.
And my father and even other elders in the congregation will tell me, well, if you look at the Bible and you read the scriptures, it says that those people will be given a second chance, and that people will have the opportunity to fix their ways. So, for example, if you're addicted to cigarettes and you can't break the habit because you're physically incapable of it, or even psychologically incapable of it,
Yeah.
then it's possible that in the new system with a perfect body and all this, that you will be free from that, and you can then worship Jehovah, in freely and without this burden. And so I accepted that for a long time, and I ended up getting baptized at 18 because I looked at all the other religions and I didn't think that they were either real or at least had the same loving environment that I found
Right.
with the witnesses. And I wasn't thinking, I guess, as critically as I could have been at that time. And so I ended up getting baptized. But immediately after getting baptized, the summer of, I became an auxiliary pioneer, which is why I wanted to get baptized, because you can't actually auxiliary pioneer unless you are baptized.
Right.
And so I did that. But then the next fall, the school starting, I decided to get a technical degree and go to college. And I didn't have any problems with anybody in the congregation saying, like, oh, you shouldn't go to college or anything like that, because they knew if they asked me, like, I told them, oh, it's just a short program, like I should have my degree quickly. It's not one of those PhD things.
Right.
And so I guess that you could say I became very good at dodging those kind of issues.
Probing
like they asked me about my
questions and
mother,
things. Right.
I would just say, well, I don't talk to her about spiritual things. And it's almost became a game of, seeing what the organization, what was written, and then seeing the rules, and then kind of skirting the rule as much as I could.
Yeah.
And
were you aware that you were doing that, or was it just kind of a subconscious thing? Did you still believe it at this point?
Well, for example, like I knew that I fundamentally disagreed with not talking to disfellowship person. Maybe if they weren't related to you, like I could understand, I wouldn't talk to them. But if they're related to me, like I totally disagreed with that. But I was fine with most of the other stuff, to the point where I felt, one disagreement is not enough to stop me from serving who
Jehovah.
I believe to be
right.
God, right? And so I went from there. But college is what really changed things for me.
How so? How did college change it? Was it just the fact that you were kind of coming out of your shell and starting to learn all this new information? Is that what it was, or?
It became to the point where, with my early childhood, I developed serious anger and emotional problems. And I was able to get counseling through that elementary school and high school and stuff. And that really helped. I really appreciate the help I got from the secular sources.
Right.
And so going into college, I became much more timid. I was trying to control my anger and all this stuff. And I decided that the course that I wanted to take, unfortunately, was 5 hours away from home. So I had to transfer the congregation. They had to send my letter over to the new congregation, all that. And I tried, for the first year of college, it was a 2-year program. I tried to maintain myself as a witness the best I could while in college. But schoolwork piles up and all that. And I realized after several months of not being able to attend meetings, because I just had projects and scheduling didn't work out, all that, that I didn't feel like I was missing anything. It didn't feel like I had a need to go to the meetings. And
Right.
so when the next school year rolled around, second year, I went to the meetings and I was so exhausted because now I'm in the second year of a 2-year program that I would just fall asleep at meetings. And I remember specifically an example that a brother gave. I don't know if this was a good thing or a bad thing, but they would say, there's a very old brother. He's in his 80s. He comes to meetings, and some of the brothers have saw him maybe sleeping at the meeting, and
Okay.
they would complain that this older brother was sleeping at the meetings. And
Right.
I've heard this story several times at several different Kingdom Halls, so it's very strange.
Okay.
But the moral was, at least the brother is attending. He may be exhausted from work, or he may have some other circumstances, but at least he's attending, right? So that was my philosophy in the second year of college.
Yeah.
But then I realized that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
You're attending, you're sleeping, you're supposed to be there like to learn stuff. Why would you be like sleeping? If you're sleeping, you're not gaining anything
Right.
from it.
That's super fascinating. I remember there was I think he was an elder who was handling the microphones one time, and the dude slept at every single meeting, and he's an elder. And he was supposed to bring the microphones over, and the dude was just completely knocked out sitting in his chair. They were like, go ahead and just yell it out, sister. They told her to just yell out her answer. It's such an odd culture, like, where they make up these excuses and ideas for this kind of stuff, right?
Right. So I don't want to take up too much of your time.
No, you're good.
You probably want other people. But so eventually, and one other thing I learned while I was there is that finding friends when you move to a new place is very hard. So the only friends I really had, which again was never really looked down on by my father or anybody else, but was mostly school friends. And so I had lots of college friends when I was there, but there was only like one brother in the whole Kingdom Hall of this new congregation that actually took any kind of interest in me, and he would pick me up for the meetings. And I felt like it was probably because he didn't really have anybody else. He was a single guy. He was a bit older, but we had a good working relationship, I guess you could say, going in service and all that.
Yeah.
But he was really the only one. Like, I didn't feel like I had any kind of connection to others. And even growing up, I didn't have any connection to the ones my age because they were interested in soccer and all this stuff, and I was interested in video games like my dad. So it was very tough to find friends within the Kingdom Hall.
Yeah, I had the exact same experience, so I totally know what you mean.
And then eventually I decided I had the opportunity in my third year to take a third year, but instead of completing it in college in my home country, I could go to a different country and complete a third year and get a bachelor's degree. So I decided, I talked to like people in the congregation. I talked to my family. My mother was like all supportive. She's at this point I had a good relationship with her, and she was like, yeah, just do it. Go ahead. My father didn't want me to. This was the first time he's really said like, you shouldn't do this to me. But at this point I'm an adult, and he didn't really have much control over that. But there was one brother in my congregation who said to me, it was kind of weird the way he was saying it, because all of the literature and stuff at the time was saying, don't pursue higher education, don't pursue it. But this one brother would pull me aside at the meetings, and he said, hey, I heard that you're trying to go for higher education. Do it 100%. You need it in this world. This world, he's kind of using the words that we say.
Yeah,
this world,
cliches.
You should not go without a higher education. You're gonna, if the new system doesn't come, if Armageddon doesn't come, you're gonna be stuck. So just go for it.
Right.
And it was weird because nobody else was saying that. Everybody else was saying, well, what if Armageddon comes tomorrow? Like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna be in a different country, and you're not gonna be with your family. So it was weird, but I definitely think I felt like he pushed me just this different opinion to go. And so I decided to go.
Right.
And yeah, so I went. And when I went there, I decided, you know what? I'm not going to transfer to the local congregation, because I Googled where the local congregation was, and it was way too far away from the college that, it'd be very difficult to get there. So I went and I did my year of university, and I had a great time. And then when I came back, I decided to get in touch with the local congregation again. And while I was at college and university, I started getting really into YouTube videos because, I'd be studying and stuff and just having stuff on in the background. And that's how I discovered a lot of, let's say, debunking channels. So anyone from Logic to all these other channels that I thought were hilarious because they were like taking Christian videos and
Right.
Muslim videos and all this stuff and debunking all their arguments. And of course, I would laugh along with my Jehovah's Witness belief and say
Yep.
like, yeah, they believe in hellfire, isn't that so dumb, right? We don't believe in hellfire,
Right.
and and that was kind of funny. And the point that kind of hit me once I came back home was I was watching Professor Stick's video, and I think it was specifically the one that you were in.
Oh yeah. Okay. I've done a video
And
with him.
I think it was the one on Jonestown.
Right. Okay. That was a guest
And
video for him.
I think it was either you or him or one of you said, yeah, there's a full audio recording of Jonestown that you can find online. And I don't even think you recommended anyone listen to it, but you were just saying that it exists.
Yeah.
And so I looked it up and I listened to it, and I just, something clicked, something deep inside. Just, I could hear the rhetoric of the man, the leader, speaking and saying, this is God's plan. This is what God wants for us. This is, the end, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And it just felt like 100% how the witnesses manipulate people.
Yeah.
And saying like, yeah, the end is here. You have to listen to us. You have to obey us. We have the truth, all this sort of stuff. It's almost word for word the same thing. And that just shook me down to my core of how creepy that was. And of course, like so many hundreds of people lost their lives because of this. And so that's when I sort of opened up, and I saw, I knew about you. So I went to your channel, and at that point, and then I saw, oh no, he's an apostate. And,
right.
And so I didn't actually want to watch your channel for a while. So I just stuck with Professor Stick and the others. And eventually I was like, okay, I think I have to actually like seriously look at what I believe.
Right.
And that kind of brings me to today. So
that's awesome, man. That's really good to hear. I'm glad that you finally broke through that barrier. I actually know some ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, I know some ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who aren't allowed to watch me, but I mean, they're still living with their family members. One kid specifically still lives with his family member. She knows that he doesn't really believe it, but she won't let him watch my videos, but she will let him watch Professor Stick's videos because it's like he's just debunking, flat Earth and stuff like that. But that's so good to hear, man. I'm so glad that you found your way out.
And kind of goes to what you say sometimes, that you can take the Bible or really any scripture, Holy Scripture, and twist it to mean what you want it to mean.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I was laughing at, people who believe in flat Earth, but they're using the Bible as examples and all this stuff. And it's crazy what you can believe.
Yep. It's crazy what you can make the Bible say if you want it to say it bad enough. You can combine any verse with any other to make it say anything. But yeah, I appreciate you coming on and talking to me. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about before I move on to the next person?
Yeah, I think you've talked about it briefly, but so at this point I've kind of done the fade thing. I'm not attending anymore and all that. And the only person in my life that I care about that still is in it is my father, and he's very strongly in it. My grandparents on my father's side, I don't really have a relationship with, but everyone on my mother's side I do. And even though my grandparents are witnesses, I don't think they would shun me even if I was disfellowshipped, because they already talked to 2 of their kids that are disfellowshipped. So,
right.
But do you have any advice on maintaining a relationship with my father without just full on
falling it, without getting shunned by him?
Yeah, basically.
I think that to ensure that you're not going to get shunned, you have to play by their rules. So I think you're going to need to do everything you can to leave spiritual stuff out of it, and maybe even build up that spiritual bit. You don't want to tear him down. You don't want to make him feel bad or any of that stuff. You want to support him as your father or whatever. That would probably go a long way. And I think that the tough part is when people realize how harmful this religion is, and they try to break its hold on their family members. And when that happens, if the family members discover that that's taking place, that that you're trying to break its hold on them, then they shut down completely. It's like the backfire effect. They cut you out of their life, and they don't want anything to do with you. So I think if you want to guarantee that you get to maintain the relationship, it would be to be non-confrontational and supportive in every way you can, and just leave spirituality out of it completely. But there's a good chance that he may be in there for the rest of his life, and we have to accept that that's a possibility.
All right, I'll leave you with one last thought.
Okay.
When I did watch the Jonestown, I listened to it and everything. And those first few weeks after, I felt very angry and betrayed.
Yeah.
And I think I'm mostly over that. But do you have any words? Because sometimes I hear you speak about, you don't hate any current witnesses, but you do absolutely hate the organization.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have those feelings of hate.
Right, I'm with you. I will give you an answer to that. I'm going to give it to you off air, though. So I'm going to disconnect, and I'll move on to another person after answering the question, okay?
All right, thanks so much, Delta.
All right, thanks for coming on and talking to me. It's been really interesting. So you're right. Hate is not an ideal emotion. Hate is not... in an ideal world, there wouldn't be any hate for this organization or anybody at all, right? So I made this video called How to Troll Jehovah's Witnesses forever ago. And when I made that video, my intent was to describe a situation in which I was trolled as a Jehovah's Witness, in which somebody released dogs on me. That's a little bit more than trolling. That's harassment. That's attacking somebody, and I was 10. You can't do that to a kid. So my goal with that video was to show people that Jehovah's Witnesses are humans too, and they deserve respect just like anybody else. And mistreating any Jehovah's Witness out there, you could be mistreating me in a different world, or you could be mistreating a future me, somebody who isn't out yet, but eventually will be, and will become an activist against this religion. I feel like it's important to draw that distinction because there is going to be hate, period. There will be hate. There will be anger. There's going to be, after we realize all the shit that we went through, after we realize what this organization put us through, there's going to be a lot of hate. It's inevitable. So my goal is to redirect that hate into something productive. It's not productive to hate Jehovah's Witnesses. It's not, the people. It's not productive to hate people for this thing or that thing. My friend completely abandoned me. My mom completely abandoned me. I could hate them, or I could hate the thing that made them believe that that was the right choice. They are not bad people. My mom isn't a bad person. My best friend from childhood is not a bad person. They were just suckers, just like I was, just like the rest of us were. We were suckered into believing this thing that this organization convinced us of, right? So I wanted to redirect that hatred that is inevitably going to be there into something productive. That's my goal. Ideally, you're right, there wouldn't be any hate. Ideally, we would recognize that hate is not productive generally, and reform is probably what we'd want to shoot for. Just completely destroying the organization, just getting rid of it entirely, that's unrealistic. It's not going to happen. Right now, there's a member of the Heaven's Gate cult, had 40 people in it, I think in 1996. They believed that there was a spaceship flying behind the Hale-Bopp comet, and they had to put like $1.25 in their pockets or something for space fare, and then they ate some applesauce with some tranquilizers in it and put plastic bags over their heads and killed themselves. 40 of them. Now, there are still people alive today who believe it right now. There's somebody running the Heaven's Gate website right now who still believes it. So there will always be a Jehovah's Witness out there who believes it. No matter what we do, no matter, however many governments ban them, no matter what happens, there will always be a Jehovah's Witness out there. So destroying it is unrealistic. I think our best bet, I talked about this in the John Cedars interview recently, our best bet is reform. We can hope for reform. I don't think it's going to happen, and if it does, I don't think it'll be soon. But my goal with my channel is to bring people in from out of the cold, people who realize that this religion is bullshit, and push for reform. So, yeah, there's my answer. But anyway, it is actually pretty late night. It's 10, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to take another person. That was a pretty long chat, but I feel like it was worth it. It was definitely interesting. So I appreciate you coming on, Medic, and talking to me. But I tried to get CDGHJ on, and I couldn't. Let's see if it works now. Are you there? Can you hear me?
Do you hear me?
Yeah, awesome. So how's it going?
Awesome. I have no idea.
So what religion were you originally? Are you still religious, or?
I'm an agnostic atheist.
Really? Okay. Have you always been like that, or is this a recent development?
My parents, well, they're divorced, but they're religious ever since I heard the idea of it. The Bible, it was kind of weird. It was like a disconnect because the things they were saying seemed like fairy tales, but they tried to make it seem as if it was real.
Right. Okay. So your parents, they didn't believe it until recently then? Is that what it was?
No. They been religious, though I'm unsure for how long.
Oh, okay. I see. Interesting. So you didn't grow up in it then. Is that fair to say, or did you? Like grow up in religion?
I wouldn't. I've been able to avoid that, though I was kind of recently in a situation where I could have been brainwashed.
Oh, really? What kind of situation? What happened?
My father, who now believes the world is flat,
Oh no,
is very, very heavily religious, and multiple things. He thinks all of science and all of technology is of Satan.
Oh, that's not good.
Well, I was in a situation where I couldn't really have contact with anybody ever. Even at the time, there was no schooling or anything because I was homebound, though even during that period, it might have been summer, so I don't even remember the teacher coming.
Right, that's crazy. So you didn't really have any contact with anybody then, or?
It was just my father and me. And basically 24/7 he played this preacher and also conspiracy theorist, flat earth like video shit.
Yeah.
Whenever he was awake, and he did not like it turned off whenever he was asleep. So I kind of had to hear that shit 24/7.
That's crazy though. Like, what kind of stuff did they talk about?
Like, for example, whenever he watched cable, it was always shit like Ancient Aliens.
Okay. You know, I've never seen that show, but I've heard that it's just complete garbage.
You've probably seen the meme of it then.
Yeah, probably.
Pyramids, aliens.
Is that what it's all about? It's just like they blame everything on the aliens and stuff, on ancient aliens?
That's it's kind of a meme of that, but it's a bit
Right,
more than
right.
that.
Well, that's kind of interesting. I don't know. Maybe I'll give the show a watch one of these days. So you were kind of isolated from everything and everybody except for your dad, and he kept listening to this BS then, right?
Yeah, and I'm unsure of how long this period of time was. Was at it. It's kind of drove me insane to me.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to deal with constantly hearing the same stuff 24/7,
Yeah.
and I couldn't really get online or listen to anything else. I could never not hear it. Basically, I couldn't get away from it.
Yeah, I understand exactly what you mean, actually. I can understand how crazy that is. Although at the time when I was going through something similar, I actually believed it too. So I think it's a little bit less hard to deal with if you believe it too. I mean, I'd just go nuts inside if I knew this garbage I was listening to was BS and couldn't do anything about it, you know?
Yeah, it. I was an agnostic atheist at the time, also, and I still had to hear that shit.
Right? Yeah, that's really interesting because there's a lot more to cults than just religious cults. You know, there are more than just religious cults. There's, I don't, you know, I don't know if I would call Flat Earth a cult or not. It's kind of a complicated thing,
Well,
and I'll
my
make a whole
dad
video
thinks
on it.
he hears a voice from God.
Oh, really? Your dad thinks he hears a voice from God?
He literally hears a voice and he thinks it is God.
Oh,
Like he
that's not
actually
good.
hears a voice. And he wants to move to Kansas for some reason and start a church there.
Oh, that's not good. Do you live
It
with it?
may
Like, how
end
old
better.
are you? You don't have to say how old you are if you don't want.
18.
Oh, okay, 18. Well, that's not so
But I
bad
don't
then.
live with my father anymore.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
I was able to stop living with him for actually I forgot how long ago it was, honestly.
So how long have you been agnostic atheist? Like a long time then, right? You said?
Uh I'm unsure of when I would specifically have started calling myself that,
Right.
though I've basically always had those kind of beliefs.
Right.
Whenever I was like 5, 6, or not.
Oh, wow, that's pretty early.
Very, 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 very young,
Right.
and they were trying to teach to me about the Bible being true and shit.
Yeah.
It just seemed like it was kind of a disconnect because of they were using language and stuff that you would use in a fantasy book.
Sure.
But
Sure.
it was true.
Yeah. To 100%. Of course, I kind of grew up understanding that all that stuff was true. Like, I don't know why I didn't really connect the dots that it was total BS, but other people did. I do wonder why that is. Like, why is it that other people realized it was BS? I don't know. But anyway, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, I appreciate you coming on and talking to me. It's been pretty cool to have you on.
Yeah, I like talking with you as well.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy stuff. I don't know. It's a complicated thing. Is Alex Jones the leader of a cult? I don't know. I need to make a whole video about it and really, really think about it for a good long time before I call it either way. Is Flat Earth a cult? I don't believe it is. Flat Earth specifically. I'll just say it here and now. I think that Flat Earth is a cult-like mindset. There's no hierarchical structure to go with it, so I don't think that can really be considered a cult. But cult-like mindsets can be just as bad as cults. In fact, they can be more harmful than cults in a lot of ways. So, I mean, don't think that just because I'm saying it's a cult-like mindset instead of a cult means that I think that it's less harmful than one, because it can be even more harmful. But anyways, yeah, I appreciate you guys coming on. It's been a really, really interesting podcast. Really awesome podcast. Awesome guests. Yeah, I will talk to you guys next week.